All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I, once again, am Matt Hunt, and I'm with Johan Schultz. We're talking through some spots in our last video involving a low jack button 40 big blind scenario. So if you watched that one, then this is going to be a follow-up, and we're going to dive into some trainer spots now looking at the same type of scenario. So without any further ado, let's load up some spots and let's dive in and play through some hands to talk about some of these concepts in some more detail.
So what we're looking at will be 40 big blinds. Effective, we are low jack and we're playing against the button, and it's a single raise pot. Last time we went over the pre-flop ranges and how we expect the boards to interact. So let's see. Okay, the first board, maybe I'll start. I take one, you take one.
Yeah, sounds good.
So we are the low jack and the flop came 9-6-3. So it's a somewhat blank board, I would say. Neither player connects with many of their offsuit hands. Low jack does have ace-9, which is pretty sweet, but button is, as we can see on the ranges, button is probably doing a little bit better on the low boards, especially the tree. The button can have pocket trees for a set. Meanwhile, we can't as low jack. So I expect low jack to be able to bet, a reasonable amount of the time, but I think we have to be a little bit cautious overall because our range does have quite a few more high card hands compared to button, who has a few more pocket pair hands. When it comes to the sizing, I strongly expect to see a bigger size being used here. We want to get value with our, over pairs, 10s through aces. Of course, some of them can trap and check raise and so on. There's something called balance in this game. But yeah, we also want to bet the size because button will have a lot of, say, 2 over card with backdoor flush draw, even sometimes with a backdoor straight draw as well. Even king 10 suited would be a pretty easy continue against a small bet. Yeah, and for the frequency, what are we thinking here? Kind of feels like a 35-40% C bet.
Yeah, I think so. I'm feeling like with the bigger bet board textures, the frequency it's only really going to start to go higher in the situations where we're able to kind of value bet with a lot of our pocket pairs. So like the paired board textures that we saw in the previous video, we can bet bigger at a higher frequency quite often in some of those spots because hands like sixes can throw in a big value bet. But here, we've got hands like 8s and 7s that they're kind of strong, but they don't really have that much ability to just like shovel in a big bet and get tons of value because there's not a lot of 6x in the flatting range. So I'd be surprised if the c-bet frequency went too high. And I think, 35-40% seems probably not too far off. I'm curious what you would think about this specific hand combo, though. How would you rate this one as a betting candidate?
Maybe the viewers noticed that before we even addressed what hand we have, we discussed how we think the ranges are going to play, because that is the most important thing. The second most important thing is going to be what we should do with our hand. I could be wrong with the frequency. I've not studied this spot a lot, especially recently, but let's assume and think, let's say, okay, I think the range is betting 35% of the time and is using the big size. Now let's take a look. How do we think our hand plays on this board? Ace-5, I think, is a very tricky hand to play, because it is a hand with some backdoor draws. Usually you like having backdoor draws when you're betting out of position, especially if you're betting for big size. But I think something people overlook a lot in these spots is you also want to have equity against the in-position players' pocket pairs. And this is where the 5 looks really pretty. It looks really nice, but it's not really a nice card. You would maybe rather have a 7 on 8 that has more equity against pocket 5s and 7s and 8s. I could see this one being a high frequency checking hand.
I'm inclined to think the same. I think one thing that I always look out for as well is we want to be very sensitive to the combos that are dominating us and the combos that we're dominating. So in this case, we're dominated by a lot of the better ace highs. If we had the ability to bet and get a lot of better ace highs to fold here, then that would be a pretty good incentive for us to bet. But my concern is that the only ace highs that are going to fold here are ones that we're kind of chopping with a lot anyway. Even something like ace 8, ace 7 with a backdoor, which technically is ahead of us, we're possibly not even getting the clubs and diamonds of that combo to fold anyway. In fact, I don't think we are. And we may get some, I don't even know if like ace 10 off with no backdoor folds here, to be honest, against B66. So I would think that we probably get very little better stuff to fold. And I also think that even though there's like some shreds of like 5-4 suited and stuff that we technically are ahead of that calls, and so some shreds of like ace deuce of diamonds and stuff, it just feels like we're right in that territory where when we bet, everything better calls and most of what's worse just folds.
Yeah. So I mean, we could definitely be wrong. Maybe this hand just does have enough backdoor equity to where like it doesn't matter that the 5 is a low card. Maybe ace 10 off, mixes some folds from button's perspective, and then it becomes, reasonably appealing to bet this one. But I do think hands that you would see bet more often are going to be a hand like Jack 10 of hearts or Queen Jack of hearts or something like that, to higher Queen 10 of clubs. So let's go for a check with this one and let's see how the hand plays overall. So yeah, we were a bit wrong in terms of the hand frequency. You see the lower bar here is how much the hand bets, and then the upper bar is how much the range bets. So I said 35 to 40% for the range. It ended up being 51. So I was a little bit too passive here, and I was definitely too passive with the hand. Now I do want to go in and look at the flop, see that, okay, ace 5, it's betting reasonably often. But if we go down to ace deuce, like ace deuce also has like reasonably, has a backdoor straight draw. It has a backdoor flush draw, but it just doesn't have enough high card value with the deuce. So it does make a difference. The 5 was just a bit too pretty.
Yeah, it probably is. I think it's also noteworthy here as well in terms of the frequencies. It's important to be aware that we're only betting 66%. We're not we're not using a super polar size. So perhaps the board textures that maybe if we forced something like B80 or B100 or something like that, that would be spots where we'd go down to like 20-30% betting frequency. When it's B66 is the biggest size, it makes sense that 50% would be around where we would end up here.
I think in a spot like this, we don't need to bet much bigger than 66% because we still want to be value betting sometimes with a hand like 7s and 8s. If we force the size to be bigger, very quickly, these hands are not going to be strong enough to put in that amount of money. Second, button's range is way too strong and condensed for us to use a huge size like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the two determining factors that just makes bet 66 a great size. Like bet 66 doesn't matter if you get it spot on. You can maybe go bet 50. You can also go bet 80, something in between that is fine.
Yeah, I like to kind of stress to people that as long as you're not like completely on the other end of the spectrum here, where you're taking this board that's like a medium frequency, medium to large size, and you're playing this board as like a high frequency small bet, or you're playing it as like range check or something like that. Like as long as you're not that far away with the frequency or the size, you're probably going to do okay. But if you're too small and too often, or too small and often and not often enough, or something like that, then you're going to start to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, for the flop, you want to be, in terms of sizing, you want to get it just reasonably right. And overall, you just want to put in the right amount of money with your range. So there's room for different strategies. But this is a good one, I think. So now we face this bet. And maybe I'll ask you, Matt, what do you think here about the spot in general and our hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think to begin with, whenever we're facing a bet in a situation like this, we have to start to establish what's the threshold of hand that we just can never fold, right? What's the region of hand that just has to defend? Because if we did fold, it would be way too high up in our range, right? And I think that against this particular small size here, I would be pretty confident that we would never fold a hand like an ace high backdoor, just because of how strong it is relative to the rest of our range. So I don't think we can ever really decide that we're just going to muck this hand. I think as far as our overall check raise strategy goes, when we have 2 sizing options, well, I guess we have 3 because we could technically shove, but we're not going to use that size because it's way too big here. We want to look at the nature of the betting range and what part of the betting range we're able to target with each of these 2 sizes. And I think the inclination that I would have is that the larger size is probably the one that makes more sense here, just on account of the small size pretty much I think the only stuff in the buttons betting range that would really have tough spots against the small size here is probably like random overcard Broadway stuff that's just kind of stabbing on this flop. I think even any kind of backdoor, anything that is like decently strong, against that 5 big blind check raise, that's a really small size here. So I would probably be inclined to go with the larger check raise. And with that in mind, I do feel like this hand could check raise at some frequency, but it starts to feel a little bit more like, again, if we're going to check raise this hand, we have to be confident of what we're getting to fold and what we're getting to call. And I think that part of the problem with check raising ace high hands in some of these spots is that a lot of ace highs don't bet the flop that often to begin with. So it sort of becomes a bit hard to actually get better combos to fold. I think I'm slightly more inclined to check call here, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's like some frequency of check raising going on.
Yeah, good points. I would like to add that, we are playing against a solver, and while it would be very natural for a human in button shoes to check a hand like ace jack, almost pure. I think the solver is trying to balance in a way that they would also have a reasonable amount of ace x in this line.
That's
because
true. Yeah.
In the check small bet call line, Leo jack is going to have a lot of ace highs, and if button never has any, then button is in trouble.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's just a question of what ace highs can they specifically have that are actually bet folding, right? Like, because that's if they're going to bet like ace jack with a backdoor or something, they're probably not going to fold it to the check raise, which now we start to get kind of wrecked when we have ace 5.
Maybe a hand like ace 10. I wouldn't kind of bet call ace 10 in his shoes.
Yeah.
Ace 8 with a spade. I think we get some better ones to fold, but solvers are pretty sticky in position. So we'll see. So which one? I think it's also mixing these 2. That's
I would err towards call, but let's see.
All right, let's go. Let's try it.
Yeah, 60-40,
Yeah, 60-40. There's merit for both. And I want to emphasize, if we quickly go and look at the flop again, mentioned, ace 5, it's a pretty it's betting sometimes, but these hands, like the other ones I mentioned earlier, Jack 10, Queen 10, Queen Jack, these are the highest frequency c-bets. And one of the reasons they sometimes check is because they're also very good hands to check raise. You see, every time we did not c-bet these, they are going in the check raising range.
I think it's a really good heuristic here that if we have a hand that's kind of mixing between bet and check, and then we find a check, then almost always we have to at least consider check raising, because in the end we're putting in the same amount of money, or approximately the same amount of money, right? There's a difference here, but we're still kind of creating the same approximate SPR on the latest streets and so on. So a lot of the value range that can bet on this flop is also going to, if it doesn't bet, it's also going to be a candidate to check raise. If there's a bluff that bets on this flop, if it doesn't bet, it's also going to be a candidate to check raise. And what you don't necessarily want to do is fall into that trap of like, well, my hand is going to mix bets or checks, but then if I check it, now I'm somehow going to just always check call it, right? That's pretty rare. There's only certain types of hands that really make sense for that.
Yeah, this is if we look at the overall strategy, we see 20% check raises. This is pretty normal on a board like this, in a spot like this. Check raising is just a really big part of the strategy. The board is very dynamic. There's lots of reasons to put in more money on the street. Simply denying equity from high cards. Both players, benefit from that. So you see the flop being a very explosive street on this board.
Yeah. Well, can we take a quick look at the continue range versus the check raise from Villain here? Because I'm curious about how wide they are defending against that raise 60.
Yeah, it went call, but let's pretend it didn't. Here we go. We see. So ace 10 is out.
Ace 10 off. Yeah.
Yeah, ace 10 off is out.
But ace 7 backdoor. Ace 7 backdoor doesn't even fold. Wow.
Yeah, it's just calling, it hopes to hit an ace, it hopes to hit a
Mhm.
backdoor, and depending on the run out, it's probably gonna check down, I guess, because we do have on most runouts. But like a hand like King 10 or Queen 10, when they call, they are
Mhm.
most likely looking to bluff on later streets
Yeah.
if faced with a passive action.
And there's some stuff that I think people really kind of miss here, or like some stuff that people get a bit wrong. Because if you look at some of the continues, like we're folding pocket fives sometimes, and we're mostly folding
Mhm.
pocket fours, but we're also peeling like King 7 with a backdoor and Ace 7 with a backdoor and some things like that. And I feel like that is a great example of how important it is to think forward about not just like trying to predict your opponent's action, but specifically to think about the way that your range is going to interact with certain turns and rivers and the functionality of different hands, because fives and fours are just going to become bluff catches on basically all runouts. But a hand like A7 with a backdoor is going to actually improve to be better than a bluff catcher at some frequency, which is going to make it a more frequent continue or an easier continue in some of these spots.
Yeah, you're gonna see if we hover over pocket fives. Pocket fives has around 44% equity. Meanwhile, A7 with a backdoor flush draw, it has 41%.
Mhm.
But A7, like the equity A7 has, it's just more better suited to play big pots. And a big pot is brewing once the flop goes check bet, check raise.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, let's go back here. So we just went for the boring check call, but to play good poker, you also gotta use the quote unquote boring option sometimes.
Yeah.
I think we're just going to check it back to the button. I don't see us improving too much on
Yeah.
the 7.
I'd be surprised if we have donks here. Yeah, no donks.
Yeah, clear, no donks. And he goes for half pot bet now. Yeah, what are you thinking?
Well, I think this is certainly on these types of textures where it's quite dynamic, and we do have some strong hands, but we have there's a decent chunk of strong hands that are quite vulnerable here. I think it's quite common to see at least some portion of some pretty large check raises. And in this case, I don't think we're so deep that we can't check jam some hands. Like I think some of our like two pairs, like 6-7 suited, if we have, I don't think we have 9-7 suited in range. It might be in that low frequency. Maybe some of the vulnerable overpairs here that are going to have some bad river spots, they might have some check jams here. And quite commonly, that check jam range will be constructed from some of those vulnerable value hands, and then also some combo draws, so some hands like exactly what we have, where live against literally everything, but we're, not super high equity against that much stuff. So it's not out of the question here to think about check jamming. I think the smaller check raises, I'd be a bit uncertain about those, honestly, because neither of them really feels like it accomplishes a ton. Like the click back to 11.7 doesn't really feel like it puts anything in villain's range in that tough of a spot. And then the 16 is sort of like almost committing with so many hands, because the price we're getting if we face a shove is going to be so good. So I'd probably build a strategy here off of check call, check jam, or check fold. And then range wise, I'd go with a lot of that vulnerable value as the check jam, maybe trapping some sets, trapping the straight if we have it, and probably check jamming some combo draws, maybe some 7-8 type stuff as well. And I think this particular hand feels like it seems pretty good as a check jam to me, because we can really put some 9x in some tough spots. Like we can put a variety of hands here in some pretty awkward spots against that check jam, I think. So I kind of like that here.
It's interesting because I might have a different view on this.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right.
So if we can, on Octopi, you can look at the range by hovering over here. When you're playing the trainer, you can only view something that has already happened, and you can only view your own range. Otherwise, it might not be good for learning. But I just want to highlight, we don't have a lot of these like low pocket pairs anymore. All the pocket pairs, except for some aces, have either bet the flop or gone for a turn check raise. So what we're left with are, very strong nutted hands that are slow playing, 9, 7s, 6s, a little bit of 10, 8, and as mentioned, aces, and then also something like 9, 7. And then the rest of the range has a lot of, say, ace jack and so on. I do think check raising is a part of the strategy. I don't think it's as big of a part of a strategy as it was on the flop. And I think this hand, it might be like almost too strong to check raise. Not that it needs equity. It clearly has all the equity in the world, but it's more like it's just not a hand that benefits that much from getting folds, I would think. I could be wrong here.
Maybe we do get a bit too much, like we get too many folds from like king 10 of hearts, like, or I guess maybe that's a combo draw as well. But like if we get villain to fold worse hearts, that's kind of bad, I guess. So that might be a consideration here. It is an awkward SPR. I think that's like the main thing that's kind of tripping me up here. It's like if villain was to bet bigger here, I feel like it would be a lot more straightforward that we wouldn't really have much incentive to use those non-all-in check raise sizes. Like as soon as they go to like even 7, 8 bigs here, it becomes really difficult to check raise to any size other than all in. But because they specifically went to 5, it's like maybe we have room to have that non-all-in check raise here, but it's just kind of awkward. And that's I think what probably it's part of what makes George's size here a pretty interesting choice and a good choice for him.
Yeah, like the size is of course pretty clever. Like it's tough for us to continue a hand like ace 10 or ace king, pocket 5s, maybe pocket 5 just as a, I guess, pocket 5 is double gut shot, but like pocket 4s maybe. But yeah, in this case, like let's say he's bluffing a hand like king jack, king queen, like he might, like we might sometimes call and then it just goes check check and we take it down with ace 5. It just doesn't seem like this hand has all the incentive in the world to check raise turn. Maybe I'd rather do it with something like ace 10 or like some sort of lower flush draw that benefits more from getting the overcard hands to.
Would you be playing any check jams here, do you think, or are you just playing like a smaller check raise size?
I think I'll play a smaller one. Again, I could be wrong. And I think it has a lot to do with the type of hands we would want to check raise. Again, if we look here, like we have some very nutted hands, like 9, 7, and 9s and 6s and so on. All of these hands are not as afraid of, say, overcards compared to a range. Like let's say we had slow played queens, kings, and jacks. Yeah, maybe then we'd play some check jams.
Yeah, let's take a look. Let's see. See where we go.
Let's see. All right. So I was clearly wrong about the call. Now the big question is it an all-in, in which case I would be surprised, or is it the 16 one, in which case you'd be slightly surprised, or are we both surprised? And it's the super small one, which would be interesting, right? Because
it would be.
It really doesn't mind him folding too much, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's like a unique hand size. So now I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. I think that the 16 is like, I do find in our, like something that I've had to get used to in the sims that we run is a lot of the sims that I've run in the past. I think I've run a lot of sims that have not allowed like more than say like 35% of stacks to go in without a shove. So this putting in 16 when we have 36 behind, it does come up a lot in the sims that we have. And I'm always surprised by how often it does come up because I think it's an area that's been a bit of a blind spot for me. So it wouldn't shock me if it came up at 16, but it would certainly put us in some weird river spots. So I'm curious to see what happens here now that we know it's not a call.
Let's click some buttons. Let's start with 16.
Oh, it's good. Okay.
It's good.
Oh, it is mixing jams. Okay.
It's also mixing jams.
Okay.
And let's let's discuss the turn a little bit here. So it's interesting. Now where I went wrong was I assumed that our value hands mainly want to go for a smaller size. Again, I just looked down at 9s. It's like the second or third nut, sorry. And I'm like, if I raise and he floats me with ace 10, he only has a gut shot, right, to improve. So I'm not really that afraid of getting floated, but apparently we are.
Yeah, so I think it probably, I would guess that it amounts to, there's just like on a board that has this many open draws, like even, I mean, any 4, 5, 8, 10 heart, like there's a lot of river cards that 9s, if we were to like go small or something as a check raise, there's a lot of rivers where it would become quite hard to value bet again. So I guess it kind of does make sense to me there that that's the way it's going. We do also have, some of the 6-5 type stuff in there, 5-4, that's like some of these mergy. Oh, I guess 5-4 is a straight, so forget about 5-4. But like we have some of these like mergy check raises where it's the 6-5 is in there, 10-9 is in there, where like if we check jam 10-9, it's one of these weird spots where sometimes they call with like ace 6 of hearts and sometimes they fold like ace 9 of diamonds or something. It's probably something like that. Oh no, I guess they fold queen 9 and jack 9. Yeah, so they don't fold ace 9. But yeah, we can check jam 10-9 and get a better 9 to fold while also getting something like 9-8 or 8-7 to call. So that kind of is what's going on there. But yeah, it looks like we do have check jams, although we're only doing it with a couple of combo draws, which is quite interesting. Not all of the combo draws are doing it. This looks like this is almost the only nut flush draw that does it with any decent frequency here.
So, while I was wrong that with our specific hand, it is just a pure check raise or check jam. We see that the rest of the ace high flush draws, like especially if we go up to ace 8 suited, this one just becomes too pretty. So I just took this concept a little bit too far, all the way down to a hand like ace 5. But it's important that you do not want to raise a hand like ace 8. You do not want to raise a hand like ace 10, because it just has some showdown value. It gets dominated flush draws to fold, as Matt pointed out. It's just not very effective. But sure, ace 5 gets ace 7 or ace 10 or an ace jack and so on to fold.
Yeah, interesting spot.
Yeah, now we're on the river. We're in a very tricky line. I kind of almost, I would need to rethink the action now. We have it's around 25 minutes ago since we bet the flop, or since we checked the flop. Sorry. So generally speaking, right, heuristics wise, the ace of hearts seem to be the worst card in the deck.
Yeah.
Blocking the most amount of auto folds now, which would be ace high flush draws. So yeah, if we look at what hands we come here with, I suppose a hand like king 8 might be better. But I do just want to go to the next hand.
Yeah.
So
we've spent like half an hour on one hand.
Yeah, let's check
fold.
Yeah, let's fold. We're not winning that much.
You win, George.
Yes. So very interesting hand. It's a tough game. Let's take one more hand and see if we can spend a little less than half an hour on it. Okay. Well, okay. There's still a 9, but it's different. It's different.
Yeah, it's a different enough board. Yeah.
Okay. You go first. I did.
Yeah. So let's talk through this board. I think the interesting things about these boards, with particularly ace high also being paired, is that it really it diverges the equity in villain's range quite a lot, because you've got any ace that flops really strongly, you've got any 9 that flops really strongly, and then you've got quite a few hands which just miss the board altogether. This is a bit different to how it would play out in the big blind, because you've got a sort of medium strength range of like the under pair pocket pairs that's in there that doesn't really want to fold, but it also doesn't really want to play a big pot. But it's, I think, quite common to see these boards play. Well, I would say here that I am inclined to feel like this is a reasonably high frequency bet board for low jack, just because button does have some offsuit hands that just have to fold. They do have some low card suited hands that can't continue even versus a small size. I would guess that we probably aren't at a range bet. I would say 60 to 70% frequency, maybe mostly small bet. And then there might even be like a small frequency of the B66 that's kind of targeting like 6s and 5s type stuff here. But I would imagine, reasonably aggressive board for low jack.
Yeah, interesting. I wouldn't think it's as aggressive. I would think, I think we agree on the size. It's small. I think we can target a lot of hands such as, king 10, king queen offsuit, or lots of stuff under the ace. And while pocket pairs probably at least mostly continuing against a small c-bet, they're not in a like high EV situation. It's still like an annoying bet. So,
yeah, they're easily counterfeited too, which is definitely relevant here, because if the board was 9-9-3 or something, like only pocket deuces can get counterfeited, but even 8s can get counterfeited here on a couple of different runouts, not just an ace. But if it comes queen or something, 8s can get counterfeited, and that certainly affects the equity of those hands here.
Yeah, but with that being said, I also think we have a lot of hands that are not that incentivized to bet. Like I don't think kings, queens.
That's true. Yeah.
Maybe jacks, like they need to put in their bet on this street. They could possibly wait, but yeah, overall probably a high equity board. What do you? I think it's less than 70% for sure.
With this specific hand candidate, I think that this is probably going to be right around the threshold where most of the ace king, ace queen, ace jack stuff, I think, is going to be very high frequency bet. Ace 10 is probably going to be a bit more of a mix, I think. But we do have a heart in our hand, which I think makes us maybe marginally more likely to bet. I'm gonna go small bet, and let's see what it says.
All right, let's see. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So high frequency bet board. It wasn't quite 70, but it's not too far away from that. And yeah, you're right. There are actually a few big bets. I would just have played small bet
Yeah,
or
I
check.
would never have played any big bets in practice on this board,
Mhm.
but I do see, like, looking at some of these spots in sims, I'm always surprised where it just throws in like the 10% frequency of big bets in some of these unusual spots. So yeah, it's kind of why I thought it might be in there.
Yeah. Are there anything else we should look at, or maybe just discuss the next street?
Let's just move into the next street.
All
I think
right.
we
Good
were
idea.
pretty accurate on that one. You know, ace 10 can kind of go either way, but maybe slightly
Yeah.
more favoring bet.
Yeah. And by the way, probably fewer check raises on this board had it gone check bet raise. Probably still a reasonable amount. All right. So this turn card is interesting. I would think it benefits the button a little bit more than us. We're see betting sevens roughly half the time, but the sevens is a bigger part of their range than ours. Whatever, pocket pairs they continued, they maintain more equity on the seven than something like a jack. So I think we have to be a little bit careful. Sizing wise, it's tricky because small bet has some merit, targets the pocket pairs, but maybe it's a little bit too small. So I'm a little more between this bet and the really big one.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined on textures like this. I'm inclined not to go quite that big. Like, I think the 9.5 does feel like a bit big because it starts to get into the territory where we're putting in a little bit too much against a range that still includes a bunch of 9x. Like, 9x doesn't raise the flop that often here. So I think we still are up against 9x sometimes. I think an ace is still probably not indifferent even against 9.5. So I just feel like 9.5 doesn't keep that much indifferent here. I would probably say the 5, like the half pot size, feels pretty good as far as kind of the primary size for our range to go with. And I think ace 10 is likely to be, considering that it was a moderately high frequency bet on the flop and then the turn card didn't change things. I would be surprised if it was pure check here, but at the same time, I would also be a little surprised if it was pure bet.
Yeah, I think we are right here in the threshold, like the clear value to nice check threshold. Ace jack, obviously we would want to trap a lot of strong hands here too when we're out of position, and the turn might have improved him a little bit more than it improved us. But yeah, I would mix betting and this size. Let's go for a check this time. See, all right, and I'm pleased to see that all the sizes here are on the table.
Yeah,
with
range. Kind of an
range.
interesting one.
Yeah, because there was a lot of things the different sizes could accomplish. Pretty unique and tricky situation.
Yeah, I'm curious, just for the benefit of the viewers here, when you see spots like this in a sim where you've got 3-4 sizes that are all being used at some frequency, how do you personally approach implementing these strategies, or how much simplifying are you doing there in practice?
Was that a question for me, or?
Yeah, that was the question for you. Yeah,
I was like, are we asking the viewers? Yeah.
No, sorry. I mean,
no, sorry.
For the benefit of everybody that's probably looking at this and being like, okay, how do I? When there's 3 sizes in the strategy, how do I execute this? Like, how do you personally go about executing in these types of spots?
Typically, I would I would usually cap my sizes at 2 sizes. There are occasional spots where I try to be fancy and do more. But yeah, I look at this and I see, okay, which are the most important sizes. I think we were slightly wrong that the 89% size is used the second most often. I don't just tend to look at how frequent the sizes are used, because the small size is used 1% more than the big size. I also see that more money is going in with the big size. So I think the big size is the most important one. The second most important one is the small one. So in game, I'm probably playing, after having seen this, like in game, I was playing going half pot. Sorry, language here, but I seeing this. I would play like a big one and a small one, as we see with the solver. This one makes sense to go small.
Yeah, I think there's certain spots where you can kind of hedge and go in between, right? Where you can, like, if you see a sim, you see a lot of turn sims where maybe we have like an overbet size, and then we have a 75% size, and it's kind of doing like 25% of each one, right? In that spot, because it's 2 sizes that are, you can kind of split the difference and go in the middle and go with a single size of full pot, and you're probably going to do okay. But in this spot, I think it's really relevant to note here that the sim has the option of a big size, a small size, and a medium size, and it specifically didn't choose the medium size very often. It's not a situation where you can just take the big size and the small size and simplify to half pot, because the sim is already telling you half pot isn't that good. You know what I mean? So when people are interpreting this, it's important to be aware that there are some spots where you can split the difference and some spots where you can't. And it all comes down to, does the solver already have that option or not? If it already has the option and it's deliberately not choosing it, it's telling you that isn't a great size here, you know?
Since I mean, I mostly agree, since it is using it 6% of the time.
Right.
You're probably not losing much if you go with that size.
But in other spots, I mean,
but,
you know.
But yeah, like there's certainly spots where, like on a lot of boards, you can't just squish it all together, take the average size. That doesn't work all the time. Sometimes it works though. Okay, so on the river, I would think it's very tricky now, but I would think we have a value bet. I think it's important we beat like the ace deuce and so on.
We checked the turn, didn't we? So we check call the flop. It goes check on the turn here, and now, you know, with the river 8, obviously changing the board to some degree, but not massively, because it does complete a couple of straights, but doesn't complete either of the 2 flushes. We have to start establishing what kind of range we're up against. And the good thing here is that we're not up against a range that includes that much 9x anymore, because we wouldn't expect a 9 to check back the turn that often. So we are in a situation where ace X, or a strong ace X at least, is going to have some incentive to want to value bet here, because we've put in very little money so far with this reasonably strong ace. So I would imagine this hand is probably going to favor betting, especially because we have a blocker to that straight. And in terms of sizing, I think we're mostly probably going to be targeting some of the, well, we're going to be targeting getting value from a worse ace. We're also going to be targeting making some of those medium to strong pocket pairs indifferent. So something like 10s, jacks, that sort of stuff is going to be indifferent here, I think, if we bet a lot. So I would value bet here for the 8 big blind size. I think that feels pretty good overall here.
Yeah, interesting. I'm a bit between the 8 and the 5.3, but yeah, well said. Let's try.
Ooh,
okay,
mistake.
So that's a mistake. Okay, it's just worth a little bit less.
Yeah, that's another weird spot though, because look at how many sizes we're using, and then look at just the fact that ace 10 specifically is like heavily favoring this one size. And so, you know, another spot where if you see the range and you see the different sizes that are used, it becomes quite important to separate out which sizes are being used with which part of the range. Because I was going a bit too big with the ace 10 here, but if I had ace jack, like you can see ace jack is actually using the B75 most of the time. So some pretty small margins in these spots.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's tricky that it's using a 4 size strategy, but I think it's important to look at just how big the EV or equity difference is between ace 10 and ace jack. It's 82 against 87, sometimes even 88, depending on the suits. And it's because the spot, just like the ranges are so condensed, especially for button. So if we take a look here, ace 10 is a really big part of button's range, and 10s, which is sometimes calling, and which means it pays, is also a big part of button's range. Meanwhile, jacks is not that big of a part. So when we have ace 10, we are blocking 10s, which call sometimes, and we're splitting with ace 10, and we're beat by ace jack. But ace jack beats ace 10, it unblocks pocket 10s, and it splits with ace jack. Because the ranges are so condensed and narrow, this small difference is actually a significant difference.
Yeah, really good point. And you can also, there's other dynamics you can see here as well on river. You can see that there's a pretty strong trend to the bigger sizes simply just being more polar, right? You can see that the straight is basically checking to trap or it's overbetting here, right? The straight is never using any of those smaller sizes. And it's tempting, I think, for players sometimes to think that in these spots, you have to like mix every size with your value and things like that. But in fact, it tends to work the other way around. If you look at the breakdown here, there's full houses mixing a lot of sizes here. But in fact, most of the time, what's happening is you're kind of picking specific sizes based on how strong a certain hand is and how much value betting you can do with it, how much money you want to put in. And then you're orchestrating your bluffs between each of the ranges. Like you're just mixing your bluffs for different sizes unless they specifically have really good blockers or really bad blockers. You can see very clearly that the ace deuce, ace 3, ace 7, ace 8, that sort of stuff is only betting small or checking. And you can see that the jack 10 is only over betting or checking. So you don't have to have every hand in every range just in order to execute this strategy here.
While this might look very advanced, and it is, there's a lot of there are a lot of reasons for why they're betting the different sizes. I'll maybe try to just come up with a few examples. One of the more clear ones is we see a hand like ace 8 or ace 7 or ace 6 or ace 3, they're betting small size. Then ace 10, it's betting one size bigger. Then ace jack, it's betting one size bigger. Ace queen is betting one size bigger. This is strictly just based on how much the hand is worth. When we look at, why is ace deuce and ace 3 suited, why are they betting more than ace 4 and ace 5? It's because we want to unblock them any second now. Yeah, right. We want to unblock 4s and 5s, right? When we have a 3, it's more likely they have pocket 4s. They don't have pocket 3s themselves very often. So it makes sense to bet these more than these.
Sorry.
Yeah, why would we bet, say, jack 10, the straight always, but why are we checking 8s? Well, 8s are blocking hero calls. If we go for a really big bet, 150%, some of their hero calls are going to be ace 8 or 10-8 or jack 8, but jack 10 are unblocking these hands. So when it comes to which hands do we bet now and which hands are we going to trap with, it depends a lot on what hands you're blocking and unblocking and so on.
Exactly. And I think that maybe the easiest or simplest example of that is the fact that pocket aces here is only betting small. And it comes down to, if we bet big with aces, even though it's a full house, what can we get called by, right? You're mostly trying to get called by an ace when you bet big here. But if you have 2 of the aces, that just can't really happen. So you're either looking to get a little bit of additional value from some of the weaker hands that might call, or you're looking to induce your opponent to not only raise with some of the value portions of their range, but also have bluff raises that wouldn't put a lot of money in if you bet big. They might just fold. But when you bet small, they're going to bluff raise. So actually, when you have pocket aces, that's how you get more money in the pot.
Hands up here, and basically there is no longer a calling range. Yeah, just to emphasize your point, if you bet big with aces, 150% as an example, you're blocking basically the entire calling range, so you get no value. So if you're betting aces, you have to go small. That way they sometimes call you with a hand that you beat. So yeah. Anyways, I think that was 2 very good hands. We did do it a lot faster than the first one. We managed to complete that one in 20 minutes. So I'm pretty proud of us.
I tell you, man, making short form poker content is really hard. If you're trying to do advanced strategy in 15 minutes, we're struggling with this.
Yeah, but hopefully this was interesting and useful.
So I think that's a good spot to wrap it up. I think we got through a couple of interesting hands here for sure. Obviously not easy to go into detail in these in a short period of time, but hopefully you guys got a lot of value from that. We went into some really good detail, I think, and you guys can go ahead and construct a drill for yourselves now and drill some low jack button spots, and hopefully you'll have a much deeper understanding of how those dynamics are looking. So thanks, Johan, and we'll be back again soon with some more content for you guys.